I've held you in suspense all week. Did Nicodemus, the Pharisee, ultimately come to believe in Jesus? That's where we're going today. Welcome to today's 10-minute Bible study, wherein we are studying the Gospel of John in 10-minute, easily digestible bites, 5 times a week. Nicodemus makes an appearance 2 more times in the Gospel of John, and we learn a little bit more about the question of whether he came to faith or not. The next time that we see Nicodemus after this earliest event in the Gospel of John, he's advising his colleagues who were trying to find ways to get rid of Jesus. John 7:20-52. Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus, before, and who was one of them, said to them, "Does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does?" They replied, "Are you from Galilee too? Search and see that no prophet arises from Galilee." Here, Nicodemus urges his colleagues to allow Jesus due process, follow their own law, basically, and allow him to speak before they condemn him. He receives some pushback from them. Now, the fact that Nicodemus stood up for Jesus doesn't necessarily mean that he had become a believer, but it does tell us for sure that he was an honest man and that he was into having things done right. That could be all that we can learn from this. But then, on the other hand, why would John even mention him again and include him in this gospel? The story would have just played out fine without any knowledge of Nicodemus. Perhaps John is showing us that even a Pharisee can be turned. The last reference to Nicodemus is at the time of Jesus' burial, John 19:38-42. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for the fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him permission. So he came and took away the body. Nicodemus also, who earlier had come to Jesus by night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds in weight. So they took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen cloths and spices, as it is the burial custom of the Jews. Earlier, Nicodemus had put himself in the position and on the line to defend Jesus' rights, to speak for himself. But now, Nicodemus, later, perhaps a year or 2 later, is involved in something that will put himself under great threat. The focal point of all Jerusalem at this time was the trial and death of Jesus. And here Nicodemus plunges himself right into the middle of it because he wanted to do right by Jesus and made sure that he had a proper burial. 75 pounds of a fragrant balm he brought, which is extravagant, a kingly amount. He was truly sympathetic of Jesus and who he was. At the very least, he thought Jesus got a raw deal and was a good guy and didn't deserve it. At the very most, Nicodemus had become a full-on follower of Jesus. So which is it? How can we know? Well, let's look at the circumstantial evidence in a little more detail. His connection with Joseph of Arimathea, I think, is very interesting. He's called a secret disciple. As we know, when political pressure gets violent and intense, people simply go underground. And there was a lot of political pressure against Jesus, and so Joseph of Arimathea was a secret disciple, as Christians have been throughout centuries when persecution arises. And Nicodemus worked side by side with him in the burial of Jesus. Joseph would provide the grave, and Nicodemus the fragrant balm. Together they would give him a decent burial. That's what they were thinking. Were they friends? Had they planned this? Did they talk about this? Did they share their faith together? Was Nicodemus also a secret disciple? we never are told. Regrettably, the text doesn't say. It could be that Nicodemus just thought Jesus got a super raw deal and was being charitable and respected him. But then again, birds of a feather do flock together. So Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea would seem to be compatriots in the same faith, in the faith of Christianity. Now that expensive balm that Nicodemus brought is also significant. The kingly amount of it specifically suggests that he thought that Jesus was worthy of it. And who's the Messiah? Well, he's the king. It's hard for people of our time to see the significance of this because it is so very impractical. Joseph's gift of a new tomb was super practical. But this, the balm, was just a fragrance, the aesthetics. When it comes to Jesus and aesthetics, people often ask, does the Lord really need this? And the answer, of course, is no, he doesn't. But he appreciates it. He appreciates when people glorify him. And you can glorify God in so many different ways. You can glorify it with your mouth, giving testimony, or your voice, singing, or with your wallet, by giving something of great cost. The gifts say something. They say, I love Jesus in a different way. Nicodemus' heart was overflowing with love and respect and sorrow, and he expressed that by what he gave to Jesus in his burial. There's meaning in that, even though it was about aesthetics, just about an odor or a smell. He spared no expense. So the one who spared no expense would have a decent, for us all, could have a decent burial. When the people of our time would say, what a thing to waste on a dead body. He's not going to smell it. Jesus is no longer here. He gave up his spirit when he went to the Father. So that was no longer Jesus there. Wouldn't this be the same body that would rise in 3 days? And isn't this the same body that would visibly ascend into heaven and sit on the right hand of God the Father? And isn't this the same body that still bears the scars in hands and feet that we will see on the last day when we are resurrected? Indeed, it is. This was part of who Jesus was and who he still is. You could say the same thing about our bodies, too. We are going to have our bodies in eternity. They are part of who we are. In Jesus, they will rise again. And it is for this reason that Christians have always respectfully honored the bodies of those who have passed because of the resurrection. Do you remember that woman who anointed Jesus' feet? And the way the disciples were so very disgusted by it, they thought it was a waste. Not Jesus, for you see, when Jesus receives a gift, he looks at the heart of the giver and the person that offered the gift. It was an act of worship that this woman did. To my mind, that's what this gift of Nicodemus was. It was exactly that, an act of worship. He was treating Jesus like a king. And he was right to do so, because Jesus was the king. So this was a good thing that he did. So to me, in the question of Nicodemus coming to faith or not, to me, all signs point to yes. He became a follower of Christ. This will seem odd to you, but what really fixed it for me was the fact that John even talks about Nicodemus. We didn't need to know that Nicodemus was the one who defended Jesus. We didn't need to know that he was the one who brought the balm. But I think John showed us these 3 different vignettes of Nicodemus to show us the progress of even a Pharisee to the faith. That's how my mind was working. All the other stuff was just frosting and icing on the cake. It's not a done deal. It's not an absolute fact, but it is my most sainted opinion, and you're free to disagree with it if you like. Now, the very last verse of John, or the very next verse that we look at is going to be John 3:16 and following. You know the verse, I'm sure. I wanted to spend all next week on that and the verses around that. So for this week, I didn't even want to go into it, and that's why I decided to offer this little excursus or excursion, this detour into the realm of the question on Nicodemus. And I think it was good.